The scent of jasmine and ceremonial incense hung so thick in the air I could taste it on my tongue. Sweet, cloying, suffocating. It clung to the silk curtains that divided the preparation chambers from the grand hall where the mating ceremony would soon begin, where every unmated wolf in the territory would parade themselves before potential mates, hoping to catch the eye of someone strong, someone worthy, someone who would choose them. I pressed my palm against the cool stone wall, steadying myself as another wave of dizziness rolled through me. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Food felt impossible when your stomach was twisted into knots of anxiety and shame. You're wasting your time even being here. Cassandra's voice cut through my fog, sharp as broken glass. I didn't turn to look at her. I'd learned long ago that engaging only made it worse. Cassandra, tall, confident, with hair like spun copper and eyes that could freeze you mid-step, had been my pack's golden daughter since we were children. Where I faded into backgrounds, she commanded rooms. Where I stammered, she spoke with authority that made even seasoned warriors listen. "Did you hear me, Sarah?" Her footsteps clicked closer on the marble floor. "An Omega like you, at the mating ceremony? It's embarrassing. For all of us." My fingers curled against the stone. Breathe. Just breathe. My grandmother's words surfaced like a lifeline thrown across dark water. The gentlest hearts carry the heaviest burdens. Little moonbeam. But gentleness is not weakness. Remember that when the world tries to convince you otherwise. She'd pressed a small silver pendant into my palm the night before she died, a crescent moon wrapped around a star. I wore it now, hidden beneath the simple white dress all unmated females were required to wear. It felt warm against my skin, like she was still here, still believing in me when no one else did. "You know what happened to the last Omega who tried to mate above her station?" Cassandra continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "She was rejected so publicly that she left the territory entirely. Couldn't bear the shame. The shame. Always the shame. Being an Omega in a world that valued strength above all else meant carrying shame like a second skin. We were rare. Too rare, some said. Our wolves were smaller, our instincts tuned toward nurturing, rather than dominating, our very existence a contradiction to the hierarchy that kept pack society functioning, useful for healing, for counseling, for soothing conflicts. But for mating, for standing beside an alpha or even a strong beta, unthinkable. "I'm not looking to mate above my station," I said quietly, finally turning to face her. I just want to be here." It was a lie, of course. Every unmated wolf who attended the ceremony harbored hope, no matter how foolish. Hope that someone might see past rank and status. Hope that the mate bond, that mythical, supposedly sacred connection, might actually mean something. Cassandra's laugh was cold. "Wanna be here? For what? To watch the rest of us find happiness while you stand in the corner, invisible as always?" She stepped closer, and I caught the scent of lavender and ambition rolling off her in waves. "Face reality, Sarah. No one wants an Omega, especially not one as fragile as you." Fragile. The word had followed me my entire life. Too fragile to train with the others. Too fragile for pack runs under the full moon. Too fragile to be anything more than a shadow, a whisper, a half-presence that people looked through rather than at. The truth was, they weren't entirely wrong. I'd been sick as a child, a lung infection that should have killed me but didn't, leaving me weaker than other wolves. My stamina limited. My shifts exhausting in a way they weren't supposed to be. My wolf was small and pale, with fur the color of moonlight on snow. Beautiful, my grandmother had said. Useless, everyone else implied. "The ceremony is starting," Cassandra said, smoothing her emerald dress over her curves. "Try not to embarrass yourself too badly." She swept out of the preparation chamber, leaving me alone with the jasmine and incense and the thundering of my own heartbeat. I should leave. I should slip out the side entrance, return to my small cottage at the edge of Packlands, and forget I'd ever been foolish enough to hope. But my grandmother's pendant warmed against my chest, and I thought of her fierce eyes, her unshakable belief that I was meant for more than the margins they'd relegated me to. Gentleness is not weakness. I straightened my spine, smoothed my pale blonde hair. The only remarkable thing about my appearance, falling in waves to my waist, and stepped through the silk curtains into the ceremony hall. The space stole my breath. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing light across stone walls carved with the history of our kind. The unmated wolves had already begun to gather, females on one side, males on the other, all of them vibrating with anticipation and nervous energy. The air practically crackled with pheromones and possibility. I found a spot near the back, close to one of the massive stone pillars, where I could observe without being observed, where I could exist without taking up too much space. The ceremony followed ancient tradition. Unmated wolves would mingle, guided by scent and instinct, until bonds formed or attractions sparked. The alpha of our territory would oversee it all, blessing unions and ensuring everything proceeded with proper decorum. It was supposed to be magical. For people like Cassandra, maybe it was. For people like me, it was a reminder of everything I'd never have. I watched as wolves began to move, to circle, to find each other. Cassandra was already surrounded by males, her laugh ringing out like bells, her confidence magnetic. Others paired off with varying degrees of success. Some shy, some bold, all of them part of a dance I'd never learned the steps to. No one looked at me. I might as well have been invisible. The dizziness returned, stronger now. I'd been standing for too long, and the heat from all the bodies pressed together was making it hard to breathe. The jasmine incense combination that had seemed merely unpleasant before now felt oppressive, coating my throat, making my head swim. I needed air. I turned toward the side entrance, the one that led to the gardens where I might breathe without feeling like I was drowning. And that's when I felt it, a presence. Heavy as storm clouds, electric as lightning. It rolled across the back of my neck like a physical touch, raising every hair on my body, making my wolf surge to sudden, startling attention inside me. My wolf never surged. She was as quiet and gentle as I was, content to drowse and dream rather than fight for dominance. But now she was awake. I turned slowly, instinctively, drawn by something I couldn't name. The crowd had shifted, parted, creating a natural aisle toward the entrance where 3 figures had just arrived. Late. Unusual. The entire hall had gone quiet. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped mid-word. 2 of them were clearly guards, massive, battle-scarred warriors who moved with lethal precision. But it was the 3rd figure that made my breath catch, that made the world narrow to a single point of focus. He was tall, taller than anyone else in the room, with broad shoulders and a presence that demanded attention without requiring any effort. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and even from this distance, I could see the sharp cut of his jaw, the austere beauty of his features. He wore black, simple and elegant. No decoration needed to announce what he was. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Alpha. Not just any alpha. Every instinct I possessed screamed it. Dangerous, dominant, untouchable. He surveyed the room with eyes I couldn't quite make out from my position, his expression unreadable. People began to bow, to lower their gazes in instinctive submission. Even Cassandra had gone still, her confidence faltering in the face of such overwhelming authority. My grandmother had told me stories about alphas like this, kings, she'd called them. Alphas so powerful they didn't just lead a single pack, but entire territories, commanding loyalty and fear in equal measure. I'd thought they were myths, exaggerations meant to teach children about the importance of hierarchy. I'd been wrong. The dizziness surged again, badly this time. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. I needed to sit down, needed to get outside, His head turned, directly toward me, across the entire crowded hall, through the mingling bodies and candlelight and chaos. His gaze found mine and locked. The world tilted. I felt it then, a pull so strong it was almost painful. A golden thread I'd never known existed suddenly drawing taut between us. My wolf didn't just wake, she sang, a sound of recognition so pure and so terrifying that I stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the stone pillar. No, this couldn't be. The black spots spread, merging, consuming. I heard someone call out, felt my knees give way. The last thing I registered before darkness took me was the sensation of falling, and then strong arms caught me. I was aware, distantly, of being held against a chest as solid as the stone pillars, of a scent that wrapped around me like safety itself, cedar and midnight, and something wild, of a voice, low and rough, speaking words I couldn't quite process. And then nothing. I woke to softness, not the rough wool blanket on my narrow bed at home, but silk, cool and smooth against my skin. For a moment, I kept my eyes closed, disoriented, trying to piece together where I was and how I'd gotten here. The last thing I remembered was the ceremony hall, the oppressive heat, and those eyes. My eyes flew open. The room was unfamiliar, elegant in a way that made my small cottage look like a shed. Cream-colored walls, heavy curtains drawn against what I assumed was sunlight, furniture that looked like it cost more than everything I owned combined. A fireplace crackled softly in the corner, filling the space with warmth and the scent of burning applewood. I was lying in a massive bed, still wearing my white ceremony dress, though someone had removed my shoes and covered me with a thick duvet. My grandmother's pendant still rested against my chest. I checked immediately, my fingers closing around the silver crescent moon with relief. "You're awake." I jerked upright so fast the room spun. A woman stood near the door, older, maybe 50. With silver threading through her dark hair and the posture of someone accustomed to authority. She wore simple gray clothing, practical but well made, and her expression was neutral but not unkind. "Where am I?" My voice came out hoarse, scratchy. "The eastern wing of the Alpha King's estate," she said matter-of-factly, moving toward the bed with a glass of water. "You fainted at the ceremony last night. His Majesty brought you here himself." The water was halfway to my lips when her words registered. I nearly dropped the glass. "His Majesty?" I whispered. "The Alpha King?" The woman, I assumed she was some kind of attendant, nodded. "Drink. You've been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. The healer said you were severely dehydrated and malnourished." Shame burned through me, hot and familiar. Of course I was. I'd been too anxious to eat, too poor to afford much beyond basics anyway. Another mark of my inadequacy. I forced myself to drink, the cool water soothing my parched throat. 12 hours. I'd been unconscious for 12 hours in the Alpha King's estate. The Alpha King who had caught me when I fell, who had... The memory slammed into me with physical force. The pull, the golden thread, my wolf singing. No, that couldn't have been what I thought it was. Mate bonds were rare enough, but for an Omega to be bonded to an Alpha King, it was impossible. Laughable. The universe didn't make mistakes that cruel, pairing the most powerful with the most powerless. "I need to leave," I said, pushing back the duvet. "I shouldn't be here. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. His Majesty requested that you remain until he could speak with you." The woman's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "He's currently in meetings with the territorial alphas, but he left strict instructions that you were not to leave before he returned." My heart hammered against my ribs. "He wants to speak with me? Why?" The woman's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been sympathy crossing her features. "That's not for me to say, but I suggest you eat something and make yourself presentable. He'll likely return within the hour." She gestured toward a small table near the window where a tray of food had been set out. Fresh bread, cheese, fruit. More food than I typically ate in a week. My stomach growled traitorously. "I'll return shortly with fresh clothing," the woman continued. "The bathing room is through that door. Take your time." She left before I could protest further, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt like a cell locking. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process. Trying to think through the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. The Alpha King had carried me here himself. He wanted to speak with me, and unless I'd hallucinated the entire thing, I'd felt something when our eyes met, something that terrified me more than anything else in my life. "Gentleness is not weakness," my grandmother's voice reminded me, "but sometimes, little moonbeam, gentleness requires more courage than violence ever could." I forced myself to stand, to move to the bathing room, to wash my face in the basin of warm water someone had prepared. My reflection stared back at me from the polished mirror, pale blonde hair tangled from sleep, Eyes too large and a face too thin, the perpetual look of someone who apologized for existing. How could someone like him, powerful, commanding, a king, possibly want to speak with someone like me? Unless it was to reprimand me for causing a scene at the ceremony, that made sense. I'd disrupted an important event, embarrassed myself and probably my entire pack. He likely wanted to ensure I understood the consequences, to warn me against such behavior in the future. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, something in my chest ached. I returned to the bedroom to find fresh clothing laid out, a simple dress in soft gray, far finer than anything I owned, but modest enough to be appropriate. I changed quickly, my fingers fumbling with the laces, and had just finished braiding my hair when a knock sounded at the door. "Come in," I called, expecting the attendant. The door opened. It wasn't the attendant. He filled the doorway completely, his presence transforming the spacious room into something small and intimate. In the candlelight of the ceremony hall, I hadn't been able to make out details. Now, in the afternoon light filtering through the curtains, I could see everything. His eyes were gray, not the pale gray of winter skies, but deep, storm cloud gray that seemed to see straight through me. His features were austere, almost harsh, the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, and another traced along his jawline, marks of battles I couldn't imagine. He was, objectively, the most beautiful and terrifying person I'd ever seen. "You're feeling better." It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, resonant, the kind of voice that commanded armies and toppled kingdoms. I remembered to bow, late, awkward, nearly losing my balance. "Your Majesty, I'm so sorry for—" "Sit down before you fall again." It was an order, gentle but absolute. My legs obeyed before my brain caught up, folding me into the chair near the window. He remained standing, studying me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah." My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Sarah Ashwin." "Ashwin." He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. "From the Riverside Pack?" I nodded, surprised he would. Alpha Kings knew the territories under their command, the packs that owed them allegiance. "And you're an Omega," not a question. A statement of fact that shouldn't have stung, but did. "Yes, Your Majesty." Silence stretched between us, heavy and charged. He moved finally, walking to the window, his back to me as he looked out over grounds I couldn't see. The afternoon light caught in his dark hair, and I noticed tension in his shoulders, a tightness in the way he held himself. "Did you feel it?" he asked quietly. "Last night, when I entered the hall. Did you feel it?" My heart stopped. I could lie. I should lie. Claiming to feel a mate bond with an Alpha King would be the height of delusion, of presumption. He could have me exiled for such arrogance, or worse. But my grandmother had also taught me that lies, even comfortable ones, poison the soul. "Yes," I whispered. I felt something, but it must have been a mistake, or confusion. I was already dizzy, and the heat. It wasn't a mistake. He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. Not anger, something else. Something that looked almost like resignation. "You're my mate, Sarah Ashwin. The bond recognized you the moment I entered that hall." The world tilted again, but differently this time. Not from physical weakness, but from the sheer impossibility of what he'd just said. It can't. I stood, shaking my head. "I'm an Omega. You're a king. The bond doesn't work that way. It doesn't pair. The bond doesn't care about rank." He interrupted, his voice hard. "It doesn't care about logic or propriety or what makes sense to our ordered society. It simply is." He moved closer, and I fought the instinct to step back. His scent washed over me, cedar and midnight and wild places, and my wolf responded with that same singing recognition, reaching for him even as my rational mind screamed warnings. "My name is Ronan Silvercrest," he said. "I've ruled the Northern Territories for 8 years. I've fought in more battles than I can count, survived assassination attempts, and brokered peace between packs that had been at war for generations. I've never wanted a mate, Never believed I'd find one. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. And now the fates have given me you. An Omega who fainted in my arms. Who looks like a strong wind might break her. Who shouldn't be able to survive a single day in my world. Each word felt like a blade, cutting into every insecurity I'd ever had. I know, I said, my voice breaking. I know I'm not. I could never. You should reject the bond. Reject me. Find someone worthy of... No. The single word was absolute, final as a closed door. Your Majesty... Ronan, he corrected. If you're my mate, you'll use my name. Ronan, I tried, the name feeling strange on my tongue. You can't want this. Want me. I'm everything you said. Weak, fragile, wrong for someone like you. The council will never accept. The council doesn't dictate my mate. His hand rose, and I thought he might touch me, but he stopped short, his fingers curling into a fist. But you're right about one thing. You are fragile. Being bound to me will paint a target on your back that will never fade. My enemies will see you as a weakness to exploit. The court will question your worth every single day. Your life will become exponentially more dangerous simply by standing beside me. He stepped back, and I felt the absence like a physical cold. So I'm giving you a choice, Sarah Ashwin. A choice no one gave me. His gray eyes held mine, unflinching. Accept the bond, knowing everything it will cost you, or reject it, and I'll ensure you're protected, provided for, free to live whatever life you choose. But decide now, because once I claim you before the court, there's no going back. My mind reeled. He was offering me an escape, a way out of an impossible situation. I could reject the bond, return to my quiet life of invisibility and safety. No targets on my back, no court scrutinizing my every breath. No expectations I could never meet. It would be the logical choice, the smart choice. But I looked at him, at this powerful, terrifying man, who could have simply claimed me without asking, who could have ignored my weakness and forced the bond. And I saw something in his eyes that I recognized. Loneliness. The same loneliness that had haunted me every day of my life. The isolation of being different, of not fitting, of carrying burdens alone because no one else could understand them. He was giving me a choice, because no one had given him one, because he understood what it meant to be trapped by fate. My grandmother's pendant warmed against my skin. Gentleness is not weakness. And sometimes, little moonbeam, the bravest thing you can do is choose love when the world tells you to choose fear. I accept, I whispered. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or relief, before his expression shuddered again. You're certain? No, I admitted honestly. I'm terrified. But I'm certain I'd regret running from this for the rest of my life. For the first time since entering the room, his expression softened. Just slightly. Just enough that I caught a glimpse of the man beneath the crown. Then we face it together, he said quietly. Starting tomorrow, when I present you to the court, they'll test you, Sarah. They'll look for any weakness, any reason to claim you're unworthy. You'll need to be stronger than you've ever been. I thought of Cassandra's cruel words, of every person who dismissed me, overlooked me, decided I wasn't worth their time. I've been surviving people thinking I'm weak my entire life, I said, lifting my chin. I'm still here. The corner of his mouth quirked, almost a smile. Yes, he said, you are. The court assembled like predators circling prey. I stood beside Ronan in the grand hall, a space even more magnificent and intimidating than the ceremony hall from 2 nights ago. Vaulted ceilings stretched impossibly high, supported by columns carved with wolves mid-hunt, their stone eyes seeming to track my every movement. Morning light streamed through stained glass windows, painting the marble floor in fractured rainbows that did nothing to soften the atmosphere. Territorial alphas occupied the front rows, each radiating power and skepticism in equal measure. Behind them sat betas, council members, and high-ranking wolves from across the northern territories. Hundreds of eyes, all fixed on me, all judging. I'd barely slept. Ronan had left me in the guest chambers the previous evening with instructions to rest, to prepare. An attendant, the same woman from before, who'd introduced herself as Helena, had brought dinner, helped me bathe, and laid out clothing for today's presentation. The dress was beautiful, deep midnight blue, the color of Ronan's house, with silver embroidery along the bodice that caught the light like starlight. It fit perfectly, which meant someone had taken my measurements while I slept. The thought should have unsettled me, but I was too anxious to care. Helena had also briefed me on protocol. How to stand, how to address the council, when to speak and when to remain silent. It was overwhelming, a crash course in court etiquette that wolves like Cassandra had spent their entire lives learning. I was going to fail, spectacularly. "Breathe," Ronan murmured beside me, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. "They can smell fear." I wanted to laugh. Of course they could, and I was radiating it like a beacon. He stood at the center of the raised dais, commanding the space with the same effortless authority he brought to everything. Today he wore formal attire, black and silver, his house colors, with a circlet of silver resting on his dark hair, the crown of the Northern Territories. It should have looked ostentatious, but on him it simply looked right, like the crown had been waiting for him specifically. I stood one step behind him and to his left, the traditional position for a mate, Helena had explained. Close enough to show unity, but positioned to show I understood the hierarchy. Even now I understood, even bonded to an alpha king, and Omega's place was slightly behind. "We are gathered," Ronan's voice rang out, silencing the murmurs that had filled the hall, to witness the recognition of a mate bond blessed by the fates themselves. His words were formal, ritualistic. This wasn't just an announcement. It was a binding declaration before his court, his people. Once spoken, it couldn't be undone without catastrophic consequences to his rule. He was about to tie himself to me permanently, publicly, and I still couldn't quite believe it was real. 2 nights passed. At the mating ceremony of the Riverside Pack, the bond manifested. I present to you Sarah Ashwin, Omega of Riverside, recognized by the fates as my true mate. He extended his hand toward me without looking back. An invitation and a test rolled into one. I took it. His hand was warm, strong, calloused from weapons and battle. The moment our skin touched, that golden thread between us thrummed to life, and I felt his wolf brush against mine. A brief acknowledgement, there and gone, but enough to steady me. He drew me forward until we stood side by side, facing the assembled court. The silence was deafening. Then an alpha in the front row stood. A massive man with graying hair and a scar that bisected his entire face. His expression was thunderous. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying clear disapproval. "With respect, and Omega, as Queen of the Northern Territories?" "Alpha Weston." Ronan's tone could have frozen fire. "Are you questioning the fate's judgment?" Weston didn't back down. "I'm questioning the wisdom of binding yourself to someone so clearly unsuited for the position, and Omega lacks the strength to— "To what?" Ronan interrupted. "To rule. She won't rule. I will. To fight? I have armies for that. To survive the political machinations of this court?" His lips curved into something sharp and cold. "I'd say she has more than enough experience surviving people underestimating her." A few wolves shifted uncomfortably. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was reeling. He was defending me, but his words also acknowledged exactly what everyone was thinking. That I was weak, unsuited, a poor choice. Another voice rose from the crowd. A woman this time, elegant and poised, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes like chips of ice. "Lady Cordelia," Ronan acknowledged. "Your Majesty, the tradition of mate bonds is sacred, yes. But surely you must consider that some bonds are tests rather than blessings. The fates may be challenging you to prove your strength by making the difficult choice, the right choice, to reject a bond that serves no one. Reject me." She was suggesting he reject me, here, publicly, and frame it as strength rather than cruelty. My fingers tightened imperceptibly on Ronan's hand. I felt his thumb brush across my knuckles. So brief I might have imagined it. "The right choice," Ronan said slowly, "is honoring the bond the fates saw fit to grant. To reject it would be to declare myself above their wisdom. Is that what you're suggesting, Lady Cordelia? That I should place my judgment above divine will?" He'd trapped her neatly. To push further would be to advocate for heresy. Cordelia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely worry for your safety. And Omega cannot protect you, cannot stand as a partner in battle. Cannot— Enough! The single word cracked like a whip. Sarah is my mate. This is not a debate. The bond is recognized. The only question before this court is whether you will honor your oaths of loyalty or reveal yourselves as traitors who question your king's choices. The temperature in the room dropped. Wolves began to kneel, slowly at first, then in waves, until the entire assembly was bowed before the dais. All except Weston and Cordelia, who held out a few seconds longer before finally lowering themselves, their expressions promising this wasn't over. Rise, Ronan commanded. They did, and I felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. Not acceptance, not approval. Just grudging acknowledgement that they couldn't openly oppose him without consequences. For now. There will be a bonding ceremony in 3 days' time, Ronan continued, during which the mate bond will be formalized before the territories. You're all dismissed. No one argued. They filed out in tense silence, throwing glances back at us, at me, that ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. When the hall finally emptied, I allowed myself to breathe. That went well, Ronan said dryly. I stared at him. They hate me. They don't know you well enough to hate you yet. He released my hand, and I felt the absence immediately. Give them time. They'll find plenty of reasons. It should have been reassuring in its honesty. Instead, it just drove home how impossible this situation was. Why? I asked quietly. Why go through with this when they're right? I can't protect you. I can't fight beside you. I'm going to be a liability that your enemies will exploit and your allies will resent. Why not reject the bond and choose someone who actually fits? Ronan turned to look at me fully, and the intensity in his gray eyes stole my breath. Because I'm tired, he said simply. Tired of ruling alone. Tired of everyone wanting something from me. Power, favor, alliance, without seeing the person beneath the crown. When you fainted in my arms, you weren't calculating how to use our bond for political gain. You weren't weighing my worth or scheming about status. You were just trying to breathe. He stepped closer, and I resisted the urge to retreat. You looked at me yesterday, Sarah, and you saw loneliness. No one's seen that in 8 years. They see a king, a weapon, a tool. You saw a person. His expression softened marginally. That's worth more than all the battle prowess in the world. I didn't know what to say. The words lodged in my throat, too big and too fragile to speak aloud. A door at the side of the hall opened, and 3 people entered, 2 men and a woman, all moving with the fluid grace of trained warriors. They approached the dais, bowing briefly before straightening. Sarah, Ronan said. These are my inner circle, Dante, Elias, and Mira. They've served with me since before I took the crown. Dante was the tallest, with bronze skin and dark eyes that assessed me with unsettling precision. Elias was leaner, with auburn hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mira was striking, sharp features, short black hair, and an expression that made me feel like I was being measured for a coffin. An Omega, Mira said flatly. Really? Mira, Ronan's voice held warning. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She crossed her arms. No offense, but you look like you'd blow over in a stiff breeze. Mira excels at tactical assessment, Dante said, his tone diplomatic. And subtlety is not her strong suit. I prefer honesty, Mira corrected. She looked at me directly. Can you fight? No, I admitted. Run. Not, well, shift quickly if attacked. It takes me longer than most. Mira looked at Ronan. She's a walking target. You know that, right? I'm aware, Ronan said calmly. Which is why you 3 are going to train her. Silence. Then Elias laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. Train her to do what, exactly? Stand behind us while we actually fight? Train her to survive, Ronan said. Teach her the layouts of the estate, the tunnels, the escape routes. Teach her how to identify threats, how to read people, how to understand the politics that will swirl around her every single day. She doesn't need to be a warrior. She needs to be smart enough to stay alive. He was right. I couldn't fight my way out of danger, but maybe I could think my way out. Dante studied me with those unsettling dark eyes. Has anyone ever tried to kill you, Sarah? The question caught me off guard. No. They will now, he said matter-of-factly. Being bound to Ronan makes you the easiest way to hurt the most powerful alpha in the territories. You'll need to understand that every smile might hide a knife. Every gift might be poisoned. Every friendly conversation might be an interrogation. My stomach twisted. I'd known, abstractly, that danger came with this bond, but hearing it laid out so clinically made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I can teach her, Mira said suddenly. All three of us, Ronan, Dante, and Elias, turned to stare at her. She shrugged. What? I like a challenge. And if she's going to survive, she needs someone who won't coddle her. Mira, Ronan started. I'm serious. She looked at me again, and this time I saw something that might have been respect beneath the skepticism. You accepted the bond knowing you'd be walking into this mess. That takes either courage or stupidity, and I'm curious which one it is. Probably both, I admitted. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. We start tomorrow, she declared. Dawn, don't be late. She turned and walked out without waiting for permission, leaving the rest of us in her wake. I searched for a diplomatic word. Intense, Elias supplied. But loyal to her bones. If she's agreed to train you, she'll see it through. We all will, Dante added. You're Pack now. That means something. Pack. I'd belonged to the Riverside Pack my entire life, but I'd never felt like I was truly part of it. Always on the edges. Always an afterthought. But these people, these dangerous, powerful people who served a king, were calling me Pack. Thank you, I managed. Dante and Elias bowed and departed, leaving me alone with Ronan once more. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. It's not too late to change your mind, to choose safety. I thought of my grandmother, who'd faced down Pack members twice her size when they'd tried to take me away as a child, declaring I was too weak to bother saving. She'd been small, too. Gentle, but she'd stood her ground. Gentleness is not weakness. I'm already here, I said. And I think maybe I've been safe my entire life. Maybe it's time I tried something else. Ronan's expression shifted, something that looked almost like admiration crossing his features. 3 days, he said, and then you'll be my queen, the Northern Territory's first Omega Queen. No pressure, I muttered. This time he did smile. Small, barely there, but real. And for just a moment, the impossible felt almost manageable. Dawn came too early and too cold. I stood in the training yard behind the estate, my breath misting in the pre-dawn air, watching Mira move through a series of combat forms with lethal precision. She wore simple training clothes, leather pants and a fitted tunic, and moved like water, each strike flowing seamlessly into the next. She was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Stop staring and stretch, she called without breaking her rhythm. Your muscles are probably already screaming just from standing there. She wasn't wrong. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through everything that had happened, everything that was coming. In 3 days, I'd stand before the entire Northern Territories and bind myself permanently to Ronan. 3 days to transform from invisible Omega to Queen. It felt like trying to hold back the ocean with my bare hands. I began stretching, mimicking the movements Helena had shown me yesterday. My body protested. I'd never been athletic, never trained like the other young wolves. Even simple exercises left me winded. Mira finished her forms and turned to assess me, hands on hips. How's your stamina? Poor, I admitted. Shifting speed? Slow. Combat training? None. She nodded like she'd expected nothing less. Okay, so you're starting from nothing. That actually makes my job easier. No bad habits to unlearn. She beckoned me closer. Come here. I approached cautiously. Up close, Mira was even more intimidating. All lean muscle and sharp focus, with scars visible on her forearms that spoke of real battles, real violence. Rule 1, she said. You're never going to win a fair fight. Accept that now. You're small, you're weak, and any opponent worth worrying about will overpower you in seconds. She circled me slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. So you don't fight fair. You fight smart. She moved suddenly, not attacking, just demonstrating. And I flinched backward so hard I nearly fell. Mira caught my arm, steadying me. Rule 2. Control the fear. Fear makes you stupid, makes you freeze. Your enemies will use it against you. Her grip gentled slightly, but fear also keeps you alive. It sharpens your instincts. You need to learn the difference between fear that warns and fear that paralyzes. I nodded, my heart still hammering from the sudden movement. We're going to start with awareness, Mira continued, releasing my arm. Before you can defend yourself, you need to understand your environment. How many exits are in this training yard? I glanced around, counting. 3. The main gate we came through, the servants' entrance to the east, and the garden path to the west. Good. Which one would you use if someone attacked from the north? The garden path. It's closest and provides cover from the hedges. Correct. Now, how many people are watching us right now? I froze. Watching us? Look, don't obviously scan, but use your peripheral vision. Who's here? I tried to follow her instructions, letting my gaze soften, taking in the broader space rather than focusing on any single point. There. A figure in the shadows near the servants' entrance. Another on the second-floor balcony overlooking the yard, and a third. 3 people, I said quietly. One by the servants' entrance, one on the balcony, and one near the weapons rack behind you. Mira's expression shifted to something that might have been approval. Not bad. You notice details. That's good. It means you've spent your life watching instead of being watched. We can work with that. She spent the next hour drilling me on observation, teaching me to read body language, to identify weapons concealed in clothing, to recognize the subtle tells that indicated when someone was lying or preparing to attack. It was exhausting but oddly engaging. I'd spent my entire life studying people from the margins, trying to understand social dynamics I was excluded from. Now that skill had a purpose. Your omega instincts probably help with this, Mira noted as we took a water break. You're naturally attuned to emotional states, pack dynamics, subtle shifts in atmosphere. Most warriors ignore that kind of intelligence because they're focused on physical strength. But in court, where the real battles are fought with words and politics, that awareness is a weapon. I'd never thought of my omega nature as anything but a weakness. Hearing Mira, this fierce, competent warrior, suggest it might be an asset felt revolutionary. Why are you helping me? I asked. You made it clear you think I'm a liability. Mira took a long drink before answering. You are a liability, objectively. But Ronan chose you anyway, which means either he's lost his mind, unlikely, or he sees something the rest of us don't. Either way, he's stuck with you now, and that means we're stuck with you too. She met my eyes. And I don't let my pack fail, so if you're going to survive this, you'll do it properly. Pack. There was that word again, offered not with resentment, but with a strange, gruff acceptance. Thank you, I said. She waved it off. Save your thanks for when you actually survive something. Now come on. Dante's waiting to teach you about poisons. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of information and training. Dante taught me about poisons, how to identify them by smell or appearance, which ones worked quickly versus slowly, how to recognize the symptoms if I'd been dosed. He was methodical and patient, treating me like a scholar rather than a victim in waiting. Knowledge is protection, he explained, as we examined various herbs and compounds in his study. Most assassination attempts on high-ranking wolves are poisonings rather than direct attacks. It's quieter, easier to deny, and often blamed on natural causes or accidents. He showed me silver, how even diluted amounts could weaken a wolf, how it felt when it entered your system. I had to ingest a tiny controlled dose while he monitored my reaction. It burned, making my wolf recoil, and my skin feel like it was trying to crawl off my bones. Remember that feeling, Dante said as he administered the antidote. If you ever feel it again, you'll know immediately you've been poisoned and can act accordingly. Elias focused on politics and people. He walked me through the major families in the Northern Territories, their alliances, their feuds, their ambitions. He explained who I could potentially trust, and who would absolutely try to use or harm me. "Lady Cordelia, from the court presentation," he said, pointing to her portrait in the gallery we walked through. "She wanted to be Ronan's chosen queen. She's from a powerful bloodline, has the strength and political connections he needs. When the mate bond manifested with you instead, you didn't just take a position she wanted. You humiliated her by proving the fates chose differently." "Oh, so she'll hate me," I said quietly. "Oh, she already does. But more importantly, she'll undermine you. Subtly. She'll befriend you, offer help, seem supportive, all while planting seeds of doubt in others' minds about your competence." Elias smiled without humor. "She's dangerous because she's patient and she's smart. If you're not careful, you won't see the knife until it's already in your back. How do I defend against that? By being better at the game than she is." He turned to face me fully. "Politics is about perception. You're already perceived as weak, so lean into it. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're naive and harmless. Then pay attention to everything they say, every alliance they form, every move they make. Information is power, Sarah. And an Omega's greatest gift is the ability to observe without being seen as a threat." It was similar to what Mira had said, but coming from Elias, who moved through social situations with the same lethal grace Mira brought to physical combat, it felt more concrete, more possible. Ronan himself I saw only briefly. He was consumed with preparations for the bonding ceremony and managing the political fallout from announcing an Omega mate, but he checked on me each evening, appearing in the library where I studied or the training yard where I practiced. "How are you managing?" he asked on the second night, finding me in the library surrounded by books on Northern Territories history and protocol. "I'm drinking from a waterfall and hoping some of it stays down," I admitted. He almost smiled. "That's ruling in general. You never feel prepared." He sat across from me, and for a moment we just existed in comfortable silence. I studied him when he wasn't looking. The way exhaustion showed in the tension around his eyes. The way his fingers drummed absently against the chair arm when he was thinking. "Can I ask you something?" I ventured. "Always." "Why haven't you had a mate before? I gestured vaguely at him, at the whole intimidating package he presented. "I can't imagine there was a shortage of candidates." His expression shuddered slightly. "There wasn't. But taking a chosen mate rather than a true mate is a political decision. It means alliances, obligations, families merging their power. It means bringing someone into your bed who wants the crown more than they want you." He met my eyes, and the loneliness I'd seen before was back, stark and aching. "I've spent 8 years being a king," he continued quietly. "Being a weapon to aim at problems, a throne to bow to, a figurehead to rally behind. I wanted—" He paused, seeming to choose words carefully. "I wanted one thing in my life that wasn't about strategy or power. One person who saw me as just Ronan, and then the fates gave me you." My throat tightened. "I'm still not sure I'm what you need." "Neither am I," he admitted with brutal honesty. "But I know you're what I want, and for the first time in a very long time, I'm choosing to prioritize that." He stood, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Brief, chaste, but enough to make my heart stutter. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow night, everything changes." The bonding ceremony took place under the full moon in the sacred grove, an ancient clearing where mate bonds had been formalized for centuries. Trees towered overhead, their branches weaving together to form a natural cathedral. Moonlight filtered through leaves, painting everything in silver. The entire court attended. Hundreds of wolves, all dressed in formal attire, all watching as I walked down the natural aisle toward where Ronan waited. I wore white again, traditional for bonding ceremonies. But this dress was nothing like the simple one from the mating ceremony. This was silk and lace, intricate beadwork catching moonlight, flowing behind me like water. Helena had woven silver thread through my blonde hair, and my grandmother's pendant rested against my heart. "I wish you were here to see this," I thought to her. "I wish you could tell me I'm not making a terrible mistake." But maybe she already had, through the pendant, through her words that echoed in my mind at critical moments. Gentleness is not weakness. Ronan stood at the center of the grove, devastating in black and silver, the crown on his head catching moonlight. But it was his expression that steadied me. Not the harsh king from the court presentation, but the man who'd admitted he was tired of being alone. I reached him, and he extended his hand. I took it without hesitation. The elder performing the ceremony began to speak, ancient words in the old tongue, binding and sacred. I heard them distantly, too focused on Ronan's gray eyes, on the way his thumb brushed across my knuckles, on the golden thread between us that thrummed with recognition and rightness. Do you, Ronan Silvercrest, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, accept this bond given by the fates? Do you claim Sarah Ashwin as your true mate, to protect and honor until death? I do. His voice rang clear and absolute. The elder turned to me. Do you, Sarah Ashwin, Omega of Riverside, accept this bond given by the fates? Do you claim Ronan Silvercrest as your true mate, to stand beside and honor until death? Every eye in the grove fixed on me. This was the moment. The final chance to retreat, to choose safety. I thought of Mira teaching me to fight smart, of Dante showing me how to protect myself, of Elias explaining how to navigate deadly politics, of Ronan looking at me like I was worth choosing. I do. Power surged between us, not visible, but felt. The golden thread snapped taut, solidified, became permanent. The mate bond, formalized and recognized, unbreakable by anything except death. Ronan pulled me closer, his hand coming up to cup my face. You're mine now, he murmured, and I'm yours, no matter what comes. He kissed me, not gentle but not harsh either, claiming and giving in equal measure. The grove erupted in howls of acknowledgement, the court accepting what had been made official. When we broke apart, I was breathless, my heart racing, the bond singing in my chest. I was Sarah Silvercrest now, Omega Queen of the Northern Territories, and the truly dangerous part was just beginning. The first attempt on my life came 3 weeks after the bonding ceremony. I was in the garden, a place that had become my refuge in the overwhelming chaos of court life. The roses were blooming despite the approaching autumn, their fragrance sweet and grounding. I'd been reading correspondence, trying to draft responses that sounded queenly rather than terrified, when the dizziness hit. Not like before. This was different, sharper, more aggressive. My vision blurred at the edges, and my stomach twisted violently. Remember that feeling? Dante's voice echoed in my memory. If you ever feel it again, you'll know immediately you've been poisoned. Silver. My tea. Someone had dosed my tea with silver. Training overrode panic. I dropped the cup, letting it shatter on the stone path, and forced my fingers down my throat. The motion was inelegant, desperate, but effective. I vomited into the roses, purging as much of the poison as I could before it spread further into my system. My wolf whimpered, weakened but not incapacitated. It had been a small dose, enough to make me sick, maybe kill me if left untreated, but not an overwhelming amount. A test, perhaps, or a warning. Guards, I called, my voice hoarse. I need the healer. Now. They came running. 2 wolves stationed at the garden entrance who'd seemed half asleep moments before. Now they were alert, weapons drawn, scanning for threats. My tea was poisoned, I managed. Silver, get Dante. Everything moved quickly after that. The healer arrived, administering antidotes and monitoring my vitals. Dante appeared with Ronan close behind, both of their expressions thunderous. Mira materialized from somewhere, already examining the shattered teacup with gloved hands. Diluted silver mixed with honey to mask the taste, she announced. Amateur work. Any trained poisoner would have used something subtler. Amateur or not, they got close enough to dose her tea. Ronan's voice was dangerously quiet. In a secured garden, under guard, his gray eyes found mine, and I saw fear there, quickly masked but present. Are you all right? I purged most of it, I said, my throat still burning. Dante's training saved my life. Something in Ronan's expression shifted, pride mixing with fury. He turned to the guards. Find out who brought the tea. Question everyone who had access to the kitchens this morning. I want names within the hour. They scattered immediately, and Ronan knelt beside where I sat, his hand finding mine. The bond hummed between us, and I felt his wolf reaching for mine, checking, reassuring. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I should have increased your security, should have anticipated—" "You can't protect me from everything," I interrupted. "We both knew this would happen eventually, and I survived. That's what matters." "You survived because you were smart enough to recognize the poisoning and act quickly," Mira interjected. She was still examining the teacup fragments with intense focus. "Most wolves would have assumed it was just illness. They'd have called for help too late." Dante nodded agreement. "The training worked." She kept her head and responded appropriately. "That's as much as we can hope for in these situations." Elias arrived then, slightly out of breath. "I heard there was an incident." He took in the scene and his expression hardened. "Poison?" "Silver in her tea," Mira confirmed. "Someone wants her scared, weakened, or dead, possibly all three." "Do we have suspects?" Elias asked. "Everyone who opposes an Omega Queen," Ronan said flatly, "which is approximately half the court." He wasn't wrong. The past 3 weeks had been a masterclass in veiled hostility, smiles that didn't reach eyes, conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, whispers that followed me everywhere. Lady Cordelia had been especially insidious, all surface politeness while making sure everyone knew she found my presence inappropriate. She'd invited me to tea twice, both times surrounded by her allies, both times a subtle interrogation disguised as friendly conversation. "We need to make an example," Mira said, her voice hard. "Someone tried to kill the queen. That can't go unanswered. Not yet," I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. If we react with immediate violence, it proves I'm weak, that I need Ronan to fight my battles. It proves they were right to come after me. "So what do you suggest?" Ronan asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Let them try again?" "No. We find out who did it, quietly. We gather information. And then we respond in a way that shows I'm not just surviving here. I'm learning to navigate this world on my own terms." Silence fell over the group. Then Elias smiled, sharp and approving. "She's thinking like a politician." "She's thinking like someone with a death wish," Mira countered. But there was grudging respect in her voice. Ronan studied me intently. "You're serious about this?" "I'm serious about not giving them the satisfaction of seeing me hide behind you," I said. "I accepted this bond knowing it would be dangerous. Now I need to prove I can handle the consequences." His hand tightened on mine, on one condition. "You don't go anywhere without guards. You don't eat or drink anything that hasn't been tested, and you report every suspicious interaction directly to one of us." "Agreed?" "Agreed." The investigation took 4 days. Dante discovered the poison had been added not in the kitchens, but by one of the servants who delivered my tea. A young woman named Iris, who came from a minor noble family. Under questioning, she broke quickly, admitting she'd been paid by an intermediary to add something harmless to my drink. Just to make me feel ill, she claimed. She hadn't known it was silver. The intermediary led to a cousin of Lady Cordelia's. Not Cordelia herself, but close enough to suggest her involvement without providing proof. "She's too smart to leave a direct trail," Elias explained as we met in Ronan's private study. "Iris was expendable. The intermediary is loyal enough to lie. And Cordelia maintains plausible deniability. So we can't touch her," I said. "Not legally," Mira agreed. "Not without evidence we don't have." I thought about everything Elias had taught me. About perception and patience. About letting people underestimate you while gathering information. "Then we don't touch her," I said slowly. "We isolate her." Ronan leaned forward. "Explain." "Cordelia's power comes from her alliances, from the families who support her because they believe she should have been queen. But those alliances are based on their perception that I'm weak, temporary, easily removed." I met each of their eyes in turn. "What if we change that perception?" Over the next week, I implemented a plan. First, I requested a private meeting with Alpha Weston, the same Alpha who'd challenged my suitability at the court presentation. He came expecting to intimidate or dismiss me. Instead, I asked his advice on territorial disputes I'd been reading about, referenced his decades of experience, and genuinely listened to his responses. By the end of our conversation, his hostility had shifted to cautious curiosity. "You're not what I expected," he admitted as he prepared to leave. "Neither are you," I replied honestly. "I was told you hated me. I don't hate you, girl. I just didn't think you'd survive." His scarred face creased into something that might have been a smile. Maybe I was wrong. Second, I began attending council meetings, not to speak, but to observe. I sat beside Ronan, took notes, asked Helena to explain things I didn't understand afterward. I made no grand speeches, offered no opinions, just paid attention. People noticed, started including me in their peripheral awareness, stopped talking quite so freely when I was present, which meant they were starting to see me as someone worth considering. Third, I started working with the Omega network in the territory, something previous queens had ignored because Omegas were considered beneath notice. But there were dozens of us scattered across the northern territories, and we all communicated, shared information, watched things others missed. Within 2 weeks, I had more intelligence about court politics and territorial movements than some council members. "This is remarkable," Dante said, reviewing the reports I'd compiled. "Half of this information our own spy network missed." "Because no one pays attention to Omegas," I explained. "We're invisible, which means we see everything." Elias was delighted. "You've turned your greatest weakness into an intelligence advantage." Cordelia never saw this coming. Indeed, she hadn't. Lady Cordelia had spent weeks building opposition against me, spreading doubt about my competence, positioning herself as the better alternative. But when I started demonstrating actual value, bringing unique insights, building unexpected alliances, functioning as a bridge between Ronan and parts of his territory he'd struggled to connect with, her arguments lost power. You couldn't claim someone was useless when they were visibly contributing in ways you couldn't replicate. The final move came 5 weeks after the poisoning attempt. Ronan hosted a formal dinner for territorial alphas and their mates. Lady Cordelia attended, expecting to hold court as she usually did. But I'd spent the evening before with Helena, learning every guest's interests, family situations, and current concerns. When Cordelia tried to dominate conversation, I gently redirected, asking the right questions of the right people, highlighting their accomplishments, making them feel seen. When she attempted to isolate me with backhanded compliments, I responded with such genuine warmth that her barbs looked petty by comparison. By the end of the evening, more people had sought me out for conversation than had gathered around her. It wasn't a dramatic victory, but it was a shift. Subtle, significant, irreversible. Cordelia left early, her expression carved from ice. "You made an enemy tonight," Ronan murmured as we prepared for bed. "I already had an enemy," I replied, braiding my hair. "Tonight I just stopped pretending otherwise." He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. In the mirror's reflection, we looked almost surreal together, the powerful Alpha King and the slight Omega Queen, a pairing that shouldn't work, but somehow did. "You've surprised everyone," he said quietly, "including me. Good surprised or bad surprised?" "Terrifying surprised." His lips brushed against my neck. "You came here fragile and frightened. 3 months later, you're playing political games with some of the most dangerous wolves in the territory and winning." "I had good teachers," I said, turning in his arms to face him, "and I had motivation. I wasn't going to let them be right about me." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. "They were never right about you. They just didn't know how to see what you were." "And what am I?" "Strong." He said it with absolute certainty. Not in the way they understand strength, not through violence or domination, but strong in ways that matter more. Patient, observant, compassionate enough to see people as they are, rather than what you need them to be. Tears pricked at my eyes. No one had ever described me that way. My whole life, strength had been defined as the opposite of everything I was. "I'm still scared," I admitted. "Every day. Of making mistakes, of failing you, of not being enough." "Good," he said, surprising me. "Fear keeps you careful. Overconfidence gets you killed." His expression softened. "But know this, Sarah. You are enough. You've always been enough. and I've never been more certain of anything than I am of choosing you." He kissed me then, deep and claiming and tender all at once. The bond sang between us, golden and unbreakable, a tether that had transformed from terrifying to essential. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, letting myself feel safe in a way I'd never expected to feel again. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, I stood in the throne room beside Ronan, watching as a delegation from the Southern Territories arrived to negotiate a trade agreement. I wore midnight blue, Ronan's colors, our colors now, with silver embroidery and my grandmother's pendant visible at my throat. My blonde hair was woven with silver thread in an intricate pattern Helena had spent an hour creating. I looked like a queen. More importantly, I felt like one. The Southern delegates bowed, addressing Ronan with proper respect before turning to me. "Queen Sarah," their leader said, "we've heard remarkable things about your intelligence network and diplomatic skills. The Southern King specifically requested your presence in these negotiations." Pride flickered through the bond from Ronan's side, warm and sure. I stepped forward, channeling every lesson I'd learned, every skill I'd developed. "Then let's begin. I've reviewed your initial proposals and have some thoughts on mutually beneficial adjustments." The negotiations took hours. I navigated complex territorial concerns, found compromises that satisfied both sides, and used my Omega instincts to read when people were holding back information or preparing to walk away. By the time we finalized the agreement, the Southern delegates looked genuinely impressed. "You've built something unique here," their leader told Ronan as they prepared to depart. "An Omega Queen with actual power, not just ceremonial presence. The other territories are watching, Your Majesty. You may be starting a revolution without realizing it." After they left, Ronan pulled me into an alcove off the throne room, away from guards and attendants and watching eyes. "You were magnificent," he said simply. "We were magnificent," I corrected. "This only works because we work together." His hands framed my face, his gray eyes intense. "Do you remember what you said when I first offered you the choice? You said you'd regret running for the rest of your life." "I remember." "Do you regret staying?" I thought about the poisoning attempt, about Lady Cordelia's ongoing hostility, about the constant pressure, the scrutiny, the danger that would follow me for the rest of my life. Then I thought about Mira teaching me to fight smart, about Dante's patient lessons, about Elias's sharp political insights, about the Omega network that looked to me as proof they mattered, about Alpha Weston grudgingly admitting I'd earned his respect, about Ronan, this powerful, lonely man who'd chosen me when logic said he shouldn't, who defended me and challenged me and loved me in equal measure. "No," I said with absolute certainty. "I don't regret any of it." He kissed me like I was precious, like I was powerful, like I was exactly what he'd needed all along. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "My fierce little queen," he murmured. "Your gentle queen," I corrected softly, because gentleness was never weakness. It was just strength that no one bothered to recognize. Outside, I could hear the court resuming normal activities, the constant hum of political maneuvering and territorial business. There would be more challenges, more threats, more people who believed an Omega Queen was impossible. Let them believe it. I'd spent my entire life being underestimated. Now I knew how to turn that into power. And I had finally found where I belonged. Not in the margins where I'd been relegated, but here, at the center, standing beside a king who saw me as I truly was. The invisible Omega who'd fainted at a mating ceremony had become a queen who negotiated treaties, commanded intelligence networks, and proved that the fates knew exactly what they were doing. I touched my grandmother's pendant, feeling its familiar warmth. "I did it, grandmother," I thought. I proved that gentleness could be strong. That different didn't mean weak. That I was worthy of being chosen. Ronan's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining, the mate bond humming between us with contentment and certainty. Together we walked back into the throne room, back into our roles, back into the life we'd built against all odds and expectations. The Northern Territories had their Omega Queen, and I had finally found home.